Written by Writing with Blood. Growing up, I loved everything about the ocean. It was as beautiful as it was big, filled with millions of creatures I'd never seen before. I would beg my mother, night after night, to enlist me in anything aquatic related. Swimming, diving, junior lifeguarding, she would always happily oblige. And so my love for the aquatic world blossomed into a lifestyle filled with adventure and underwater exploration. I worked as a research assistant after college, diving down into depths further than most had been, documenting creatures rarely seen by the human eye. It was my reason for existing. I tell you this because it's important that you know the frame of mind I was in that morning. I wasn't dreading the dive into uncharted territory. I was looking forward to it with every fiber of my being. I lived and breathed the ocean. The thought of being able to dive down deep into a lake that hadn't been explored before really excited me. I still long for that feeling, now so very far away from grasp. You see, I have thalassophobia now. A phobia of the open ocean, to be specific. Though, as I'll explain, I'm just as afraid of any open body of water. The closest I'll get to diving is a tiny hot tub now. Even pools are off limits. That morning, my head tech had assigned me to a lake off the coast of Portland, Oregon. It was small, squirreled away by a campsite, and only accessible if you were able to get out through the rapids it created. It was beautiful. The light reflected off the crystal blue water, clear despite the hundreds of feet it stretched below me. I could see every detail of the open floor. "You sure you want me to dive this? I mean, you can already see everything," I remarked over my headset as I suited up.
"I'm sure, Jake. We identified a couple caverns in there, and we just like to be sure nothing hides from us. Identifying the local habitation is the key component, and we can't risk missing any,"
she explained. I hummed affirmatively in reply as I finished attaching my oxygen tank. I had about an hour's worth of air, so long as I didn't go past 10 meters. I allowed myself to fall off the side of the boat, giving a thumbs up to the researcher on my way down. My body hit the ocean with a feeling of familiarity, as if I was being welcomed home. It took a minute, as always, to grasp my bearings. Kelp floated in the water, as did stems of a couple lily pads. I did my best to maneuver past them as I swam deeper. It took me a couple moments to identify the cavern I was meant to explore, and once I had, I began swimming towards it. The fins of my feet kicked against the water, propelling me forwards with far more ease than my own 2 feet were capable of, even on land. "I see it," I breathed out over my headset. It was beautiful. "There appears to be some sort of bioluminescent organisms plastered to the roof of the cavern," I explained.
"Sounds deeper."
Static cut through my tech's speech, garbling it into something nearly unintelligible. I paused my descent. "Sorry, can you repeat that?" I pressed my finger against my earpiece, reaffirming the suction to my ear.
Deeper,"
she repeated, though I could only understand the 2 words. Usually, I would have gone back if there was a problem with the audio. Our range is pretty long, and with the earpieces being waterproof, it's really rare for anything to screw with them. Communication is a very key component in diving, especially if you're doing it without a partner, something already frowned upon. I should have turned back. The entrance was mesmerizing, though, and I was overconfident in my abilities as a diver. So I pressed on. The second I passed through the cavern entrance, the earpiece let out a deafening screech. The kind you get when you press two microphones together. I jerked in a panic, yanking it out of my ear, a nauseating dizziness overcoming me as I did so. I felt pulled towards the roof of the cavern, as if by cement blocks. It felt oddly similar to gravity, and despite my fears at the sudden weight pressing me upwards, I found myself standing on the rocky ceiling. Stranger things have happened, I suppose. At the time, I chalked it up to ocean currents. They can be unpredictable sometimes. I tilted my head down, peering out of the cavern. The surface of the ocean shimmered above me, looking almost the same as it would have on the surface. An entirely different world, only mere meters away from me. I reached around to check my oxygen dial. I had about 45 minutes left. It's ideal to leave with at least 20. That didn't leave me too long. I waded slowly across the ceiling, moving deeper into the cave, deeper into the unfamiliar and all-encompassing darkness, just barely illuminated by the glowing organisms. I pressed a button on the flashlight clipped to my wrist, a narrow path of light branching out from my arm. It helped illuminate the cavern, but caused the shadows of the rocky peaks to lurch overhead, warped and twisted in the light. For the first time since I begun diving, I sensed a fear, deep and primal. I felt as though I wasn't meant to be there. I shook it off. I wished I could access my headset, but I could still hear the static of interference, even through the water. It was no use. I knew that Roger, my assistant on the boat, would be incredibly concerned at this point. I'd already wound my way through cavernous hallways and found myself rapidly losing my way in the darkness. I double-checked my oxygen. I had 30 minutes. Aside from the microorganisms plastered on the sides of the cavern, I'd seen nothing aside from the occasional school of fish. Even those seemed slim. The combination of the sprawling cave, the lack of buddy and communication, and my ever-depleting oxygen tank led me to make a decision I rarely make. It was time to forfeit and call it quits. I pivoted, pushing myself back towards the entrance, or what I thought was towards the entrance. It took me a moment to realize how utterly turned around I'd gotten, and what a rookie mistake it was. Getting lost spelunking was the number one cause of diver deaths. I felt my breath pick up in panic, and tried to steady it. My heart pounded in my ears over the rushing sound of water. I had to stay calm. I couldn't let myself lose control, otherwise. There had to be an opening somewhere. I followed the microorganisms' trail, left with no choice. I didn't have enough oxygen to be wandering around in search of the entrance, and I didn't have enough to wait for rescue. My oxygen tank continued to dip, first to 20 and then to 15. At this point, I wouldn't have enough oxygen to return to the surface, even if I found the exit. When I was just about to give up, I saw the telltale shimmering light above me. An empty cavern with an air bubble. I knew my chances, more likely to be deadly gas than breathable oxygen, but you have to understand, I didn't have another option. I pushed myself off the ceiling, struggling towards the shimmer. It felt as though the water gripped me in icy talons, refusing to let me through, like wading through a river of sludge. Finally, I emerged into a dark and damp cavern. I quickly pulled myself out of the water and onto the ledge, yanking off my mask just as my tank dipped to zero. I took in a breath, knowing it might be my last. It wasn't. I gulped in breathable air and let out a gasp of relief as I did. The sounds of my sharp inhales reverberated off the walls surrounding me. My relief was short-lived. I knew impossibly that this pocket of air was placed somewhere it couldn't have been, gravitationally speaking. I had to push myself to the floor in order to surface. It was in that moment that I realized something was terribly wrong with my surroundings. I must be confused, I told myself. No directional awareness is common in cases of decompression sickness. I've been down here too long, and yet some part of me insisted that I wasn't that far gone. Worse still, my headset was completely dead. I had no way of contacting my team to tell them my location, or if I was even still alive. I was completely alone.